I discovered the terrifying truth behind Tom Segura's alien fears. And it haunted me for days. I never should have opened that door. I still feel a chill run down my spine when I think about it. You see, I was just an average fan, scrolling through his podcasts, laughing alongside his jokes until one fateful night. It was dark outside. A heavy fog blanketed the street. I was settling into my routine, cozy in my chair, the soft glow of my laptop lighting up the room. The world outside felt miles away, a safe distance from the creeping dread that lurked behind that one closed door. But curiosity can be a deadly companion. I stumbled upon an old video labeled Tom Segura's Unbelievable Encounter. I clicked. I was ready for another laugh. Instead, my heart raced as twisted tales unraveled. Sightings of lights in the sky, strange whispers echoing in the dark, brief flashes of shadowy figures dancing just beyond perception. My skin prickled. I could almost hear the whispers circling back, begging to be heard. I leaned closer. With every bizarre detail Tom shared, my world felt smaller, my breath shallower. What if there was truth hidden deep under the shadows? The room grew colder. I could feel it wrap around me like an ice blanket. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something peering back at me from the darkened corners. But it was only silence, the kind that clings to the air and squeezes the lungs. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, checking the time. It was much later than I'd thought. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision. I blinked hard. Had I seen something? A movement? Suddenly, a crash echoed from outside, sending me rocketing out of my seat. My initial thought was to check the door, but fear held me back. What if the stories were true? What if I was inviting something worse into my home? No longer just a spectator, I was part of this creepy narrative now. My heart raced. I opened that door, fighting the urge to turn back, envisioning all those alien creatures stalking the night just like Tom described. The hallway was dark, a vacuum of silence that was eerily unsettling. Shadows twisted and turned in the least inviting way. My skin prickled with anxiety. Somehow it felt like something was there, watching. I stepped closer, each footfall echoing in the stillness. Then, just as I was about to back away, I heard it. A low hum, a whisper that made my stomach churn. Panic gripped me tightly. I felt frozen. The noise grew louder, undeniably close. Was it coming from behind me? There it was, a creeping realization. Something was standing just beyond the threshold. I stole a glance back, my breath snagged in my throat. I could see a figure, barely illuminated, casting a long shadow. My heart stumbled into my stomach, a jagged pulse of fear. I wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare. But I couldn't move. Just as the figure stepped closer, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The echo resonated through my bones, and darkness engulfed me entirely. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I pushed against the door, helpless against the sudden isolation wrapping around me like a noose. The air grew thick and stifling, forcing the panic deep within my throat. Sounds of my shallow breaths filled the void, a reminder of my own mortality in this suffocating darkness. The weight of the silence intensified, stretching seconds into unrelenting minutes. Suddenly, the hum returned, a low resonant vibration that sent shivers through my bones. It was melodic, almost haunting, yet there was something undeniably sinister lurking beneath its surface. It entwined itself around the spindly echoes of my heartbeat, drumming a discordant rhythm that reverberated through my skull. Instinctively, I turned back to face the door, desperate for an escape. My hands gripped the doorknob, yet the moment I attempted to turn it, a cold wave surged through my fingers, seizing the motion from my very core. I was paralyzed, entrapped. Something whispered my name from behind, its voice a melodic cacophony of distant cries riding the air. Each syllable dripped with malice, and I felt it worm its way into my consciousness, taunting me, suffocating me with dread. I was already aware that something far worse than my curiosity lurked inside those walls. The whispers shifted. They sounded like those who had gone missing, melding into one anguished chorus. The air hung heavy with unspoken words and forgotten fears. Unseen fingers brushed against my neck, skeletal and cold, sending waves of ice down my spine. Gradually, shadows began to unfurl in the corners of the room, stretching and swirling like dark smoke. They began to congeal, forming shapes that no longer resembled the familiar confines of my space. A ghastly tableau emerged, one that rippled and writhed, depicting unspeakable horrors. I stumbled back, my mind racing as I tried to rationalize what lay ahead. One of the shadows broke free from the mass, darting towards me like a hunting predator that I in an act of primal instinct. I screamed, an unearthly shriek that echoed against the solid door. As I did, lights flickered furiously, oscillating between volition and doom, sending jagged contrasts of light that flashed against the encroaching darkness. Within that flicker, I caught sight of a face hidden behind the phantomsa visage I recognized. It was Tom, or at least the shell of the man once filled with laughter. His eyes, wide and horrified, shimmered with desperation. "Don't look at it!" he choked, the faint hint of urgency cutting through the din of dissonant whispers around him. The air twisted, and suddenly, I was thrust backward against the dry wall, the shadows pressing around me as though they were sentient beings eager to cocoon their prey. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out the inhuman sounds that beckoned from the beyond. A loud crash shattered the quiet outside, followed by a series of frantic footsteps. Someone was coming, maelstrom-like, moving with purpose towards my door. I glanced back at Tom, his silhouette melting away into the smoke. A knock rattled the door, splintering the thick silence I had fought so fiercely to maintain. "Let me in. They're here!" a frantic voice shouted, filled with raw panic. I recognized it but couldn't process why. The whispering shadows pulled at my limbs, wrapping tighter, drawing me into their suffocating embrace. Just as the door buckled under the pressure of the pounding from outside, the presence behind me stole my breath. Aga Ina sharp, lingering chill creeping into my mind. I could hardly move, caught in the spectral grip of terror. With one final shuddering breath, the door burst open, light flooding in and scattering the shadows, only to reveal an empty hallway eerily still. No one stood there to rescue me. I turned, expecting more than just shadows. There, slinking back into the corners of my mind, emerged the full shape of my worst fears. As I collapsed, the whisper returned, rising from deep with the voices of the lost. "You open the door. Now you can't close it." The words hit me with finality, as if sealing my fate. For as the shadows danced and flickered, the last light of Tom's face vanished, leaving me alone with the dread and the echo of my own burgeoning horror. Hands tightened around me, and I was pulled deeper into the void. What had I summoned with my reckless curiosity? And then, I felt Ida's soft, unhallowed breath caress my ear, tinged with the faintest hint of familiarity. "Welcome home." The air shifted, heavy, imbued with an unnatural presence that thrummed against my senses. For what seemed like an eternity, I floated in an abyssal limbo, ensnared by a petrifying blend of darkness and despair. Each beat of my heart echoed louder than the last, rhythmically reminding me I was vibrantly alive despite being enveloped in this malevolent realm. The breath that whispered sweet terror near my ear began to morph, stretching into a rasping laugh that scraped against my psyche. It was intimate yet distant, wild yet contralita cacophony echoing my very name. "No," I murmured, eyes wide and unblinking, desperately attempting to coax my mind back from the edge of its unfathomable precipice. The walls around me glistened, slick with an unseen moisture, and the shadows conspired, morphing into a wretched swirl of faces, those who had once been whole, yet were now fractured echoes, trapped between worlds that a jarring slam startled me from the vortex of dread. The door swung shut forcefully, sealing away the last remnants of light and casting me into a dismal gloom. Outside, the faint sound of pounding reverberated like thunder, muted yet insistent, reminding me I was still caught in a realm of isolation. I could scarcely discern where it had come from as the edges of reality seemed to unfurl like tattered parchment, the very fabric of existence worn thin, shaking. I stumbled toward the darkened outline of the door as though it were my salvation. My fingers grazed the cold, iron handle, and I vividly remembered the insidious echoes of Tom's desperation, the warning implicit in his face. My mind whirred. Who was at the door? Was it truly a friend, or had I unwittingly unleashed something that craved more than mere entry? In a determined swallow, I turned away from the door, painfully aware of the watchful shadows. They were no longer mere shapes. They closed in with intent, thirsty for my fear, reminding me that every second I lingered here pulled me deeper into their twisted embrace. They whispered secrets old as time, weaving tales more sinister than I could comprehend. My sanity hung by a thread, each flicker of movement in the undercurrents triggering my flight response. Yet again, I heard it. A familiar, soft voice cutting through the din like a silver shard, intangible yet so close. Help me, the plea pierced through the chaos, wrapping itself around my heart. Tom. It was Tom, echoing from somewhere indiscernible within the weighty darkness. My very being thrummed with the want to respond, to save him from whatever hell had swallowed him whole. Hesitation curdled within me as the realization dawned this was a trap. I could feel an unseen force tightening its grip, coaxing me closer to the edge of a precipice. I forced myself to tread away from that haunting melody, straining to remember the sudden swell of unease that had bound me with dread. These shadows, these whispers, they weren't meant to be understood. They thrived in the confusion, perpetuating their malevolence. A shriek erupted from the depths, a sound so anguished it vibrated through the very marrow of my bones. It echoed, reverberating off the walls, clashing violently with the whispers that surrounded me. Tom! I cried out, the sorrow tinged with panic. The shadows twitched at my voice, the hum around me intensified, merging in a whirlwind of sound that solidified my resolve. But it was too late. The ground trembled beneath me as the shadows convulsed and began to spill forth, writhing like serpents in heat, each one starving for flesh and soul. An unholy chill emanated from their depths, freezing me in place. You cannot leave, you called us. They chorused, their voices merging in grotesque harmony. Desperation surged. I needed to escape this nightmare. I skidded across the slick floor, searching for anything I could use against them. My eyes skimmed over the room, heart pounding like a war drum. Then, I spotted a frail flicker of light chest-high in the corner, seemingly cast adrift on the edge of reality's breadth. That it pulsed gently, promising salvation against the depthless maw of darkness. I turned to lunge for it, hands outstretched, but the shadows lashed out, darting forward like a storm of ink. In that moment, a piercing light erupted, illuminating the room blindingly before abruptly flickering out as quickly as it had come. The silence that followed was suffocating. The shadows were gone, but I could feel them lurking, watching, waiting. Resuming my breath, I turned to where I had seen the light flicker. The oppressive essence of dread enveloped me once more. But there, on the cold floor, sat a small, crumpled piece of paper. My hands trembled as I reached for it, unfurling the corners with delicate caution. My breath hitched, and my heart stuttered with realization. This was a message, written hastily, covered with hastily scrawled words. The ink was smudged, but I could decipher the words enough to send my pulse careening into panic. Don't trust him. They're coming. For all of you. I froze. They? Who was they? Out of the corner of my eye, shadows clawed back into the room, dense and treacherous. Urgency coursed through me as I scrambled to stand, ready to confront what lurked beyond the veil. The walls of my reality cracked, the air thickening with a despair that no soul could endure, and then the creeping dread felt tangible and all-consuming. The journey had been paved with terror, but now, it bled into an unfathomable abyss. A chilling refrain filled the air around me. a chilling unity in the whispers as they pulled closer, urging me to listen. "You're not safe yet," breathlessly. I turned, looking back at the gathering shadows. In the sheer grip of terror, clarity flooded through me. Realized suddenly that escape was an illusion. I had opened Pandora's box, and before me, the horrific truth unfolded, waiting to be revealed. The door behind me opened once more, this time on its own, a dark portal to something worse than I could fathom. And with a surge of dread, I understood I wasn't alone. They were coming for me. An unbearable heaviness settled over me as my heart thudded violently against my ribcage, a frantic percussion echoing in the stillness of the room. The door creaked open wider, an ominous invitation that beckoned with an insidious allure. I fought against the instinct to rush through it, my body frozen in a storm of panic and trembling dread. The shadows lurked hungrily around me, tendrils of darkness contracted, their whispers rising to a tortured shriek. In that moment of stillness, I recalled Tom's desperate gaze, the panic, the confusion that had settled in his features during our last encounter. He had risked everything to warn me, but now the precious seconds were dwindling. Would I meet a similar fate as those fractured faces I had glimpsed? Would I become just another whisper lost in this shroud of despair? Swallowing hard, I clutched the crumpled note against my chest, the paper a fragile barrier between me and the betrayal I sensed rippling from the door. Its edges felt abrasive against my damp palm, and yet, I could not hold onto it tightly enough. They were coming for me, whatever that meant. They were coming. With a clenched jaw, I stepped toward the threshold, each movement precariously borrowed from instinct, the shadows stringing taut around my frame like a web. As I peered into the darkened corridor beyond, flickering memories clawed at the mind-fated encounters, whispers trailing through my dreams, and Tom's warning. "They're coming for all of you." As I prepared to venture forward, the shadows surged, thrumming in sync with the pulse of my dread, making the room vibrate with malevolence. The familiar soft voice returned, eerily soothing amid the chaos. "Help me." It was sharp and soft, rooted with unspeakable sorrow. "You still have time." That I could feel the weight of another presence stirring in the darkness, coiling like a predator poised to strike. Glancing back, I glimpsed the shimmering specters of past souls, their hollow eyes gazing toward me with a curious long-jinga reflection of their own lost potential. Their cries now suffocated to mere whispers. "Tom?" I called back, my voice barely a quivering thread above the rising din. "Where are you?" There was no answer, just the cacophony of shadows spiraling toward the very core of my being, gnawing at my resolve. I stepped back from the threshold, trembling as fear rustled my skin in prickling waves. And then, a blinding flash of light shot down the corridor, illuminating the darkness for an insufferable heartbeat before plunging everything back into an impenetrable gloom. I knew then with all the dread of a buried truth that the shadows were not the threats themselves. They were simply the stewards of horrors yet to unfold. I could feel the air shifting, charged with unnatural energy, static and suffocating, as though the confines of reality were expanding to accommodate what waited beyond. My mind raced with images of distorted reflections, souls caught in their struggle, and the realization cracked my facade of bravery. Without hesitation, I turned back to the door, my heart pounding wildly as the memories melded with my present. The familiar soft voice emerged from the depths of the corridor once more, but this time, it commanded a daring resonance. "You must face it. You must confront them. Only then can you break the cycle." That I hesitated at the threshold as the shadows drew near, their intent thickening the air into something palpably vile. Could I courageously stretch toward the unknown? The spoonful of light whispered promises of redemption tangled with the weight of inevitable confrontation. Breath bated, I stepped forward and plunged into the darkness, bracing for the horrors that lay ahead. The pulse of unseen forces thudded beneath my feet, yet the enticing whisper taunted my sense of purpose. Somewhere in that horrific ambience, deeper and more sinister specters lingered, waiting to reveal themselves. As I entered the corridor, the epicenter of malevolence opened wide, framing the journey ahead like darkened fangs poised to devour. My footfall resounded ominously against the cool ground, drowning in the echoing darkness. The walls painted peeling memories, faces I recognized but couldn't name, eyes that begged for recognition and relief. Then the moment struck. The shadows coalesced, and I felt the sudden rush of wind encircle me, swirling like a ravenous storm intent to consume. The whispers escalated, blooming into screams, each voice crashing into the next, cascading as if they each held a piece of a greater truth. And then, amidst the cacophony, a figure emerged from the depths, a distorted version of Tom himself, entangled in tendrils of dark matter like a moth entrapped in an eternal net. My heart ripped free from its confines, aching as the dreadful truth washed over meth realization, slashing deeper than the shadows themselves as I screamed his name. The creatures around us started to reveal their true form, an unspeakable collection of twisted limbs and hollow sockets, driven by a hunger only they could fathom. Closer, they gathered, teeth glistening malevolently as they leaned toward us. But it was the eyes of Tom that held my gaze, wide and unblinking, a mixture of terror and something darker, an undeniable connection in this web of nightmares. "Run. It's too late for me," he howled, a rattle of desperation spilling from his lips, too far gone for salvation, yet still pleading for mine. Before I could react, one of the encroaching twisted figures lunged at Tom, and with a devastating rip, he was lost to the darkness, swallowed without hesitation under a wave of shadows. "Don't leave," I screamed, plunging forward in a breathless panic. But even as I did, the weight of dread crashed upon me like a tidal wave. The shadows roared in delight, converging toward me with frenzied hunger. I turned to counterattack. But in the squall of fear, I stumbled and fell, the shadows embracing me in a cold grip. And then, with a burst of adrenaline, I leapt to my feet only to encounter a visage frozen in horror, Tom's face blurring in the cloud of my urgency, whispering words that coiled around me, suffocating my last glimmer of hope. That in that instant, I realized I was not being pursued alone. The shadowed horde surged violently, and a surge of unimaginable terror clawed through me, awakening a primal fight or flight instinct. I might have understood the truth about Tom and what awaited Muhat they were, but my fate danced agonizingly close, and by the time I understood their true intent, it would be far too late. In the choking darkness, I felt that icy grip latch around my throat, and before I could scream again, another figure emerged from the black void behind me, the air thick with revelation, someone I once thought I'd left behind long ago, now woven into this twisted tapestry of fate. That I turned, heart thundering, and stood breathless for what loomed before me. "Welcome back," whispered a voice sweeter than poison, even as the shadows entwined to consume my world whole. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum of doom, reverberating through the stifling darkness. I stood paralyzed, unable to comprehend the sinister reality taking shape before me. The figure, draped in shadows yet unmistakably familiar, stepped forth into the flickering remnants of light, a grotesque parody of warmth and memory. Cassandra. The voice was hauntingly sweet, laced with an undertone of mockery, as if the very air bristled with dormant malice. Angela, my childhood friend last seen in the thrall of her own despair, stood before me, transformed and entwined with the restless shadows that writhed around her. Angela. No. The words slipped through my lips, a prayer uttered in disbelief. She had vanished into the void years ago, her pain manifesting as a choice long before I understood the latent evil that engulfed our lives. "You shouldn't have come back," she said smoothly, a cruel smile stretching across her facia face distorted by fear and turmoil. The shadows whispered her name, unraveling their cold embrace around her form, calling her a daughter of darkness. I stumbled back as if struck, the memories flooding my conscience. Laughter under wide skies, our shared dreams, and the day she spiraled into madness, drawn in by the whispers that haunted her dreams. You should be free. This isn't you." "Oh, but it is," she purred, her voice morphing into a chilling symphony that echoed in the recesses of my mind. "I found what I truly desired, Cassandra. Freedom from the monotony of our world, a chance to escape into the dark." Her fingers extended toward me, the very shadows dancing at her fingertips like eager pets obeying the call of their mistress. Something deep within me shrieked with horror, realization crashing over the flimsy barriers of my resolve. "You didn't have to lose yourself, not like this," I pleaded, attempting to reach for the echoes of the girl I once knew, but the shadows pulsated around her, thickening the air with despair, With a flick of her wrist, the suffocating darkness snarled, tightening around me like a serpent coiling against its prey. We have never truly left, you and I. We are bound to the same fate. Tom was right. They are coming for you. I fought against the inexorable grip, clawing at the shadows that pressed in around me, a cacophony of whispers rising and crashing like waves of sorrow. What have you done? My voice cracked, a wretched echo in the chamber of horrors. The shadows thickened, swallowing my breaths, binding me to the harrowing vision of Angela standing triumphant, an embodiment of every crushing fear I had ever known. They showed me the truth, she hissed, her glazed eyes reflecting the madness of ephemeral realities. The fears they hold are merely doorways to freedom. They thrive on your memories, the things you've buried deep. And I am no longer their prisoner. A chill slid down my spine, the utter betrayal striking me like a blade. We were supposed to find a way together, I shouted, desperation fueling my voice. My skin prickled as I felt their visibility shift, the shadows curling with relentless curiosity toward my vulnerability. The air grew heavier, each inhale filling my lungs with dread, crystallized regret. Help me, Angela, I pleaded, resisting the pull of the shadows that beckoned like sirens to the wreckage of my soul. But her smile remained, cruel and beautifully unhinged. There is nothing left for you to salvage. You're already ensnared. Summoning every ounce of defiance, I took a step back and turned to run, my heart pounding frantically against the suffocating darkness. But the shadows arose, an insatiable tide crashing over me, and I could feel them pulling me back, gravity shifting, dragging me into the depths of despair. I collided into something solid, an unseen barrier sizzling with dark energy, and panic surged through me. As my consciousness spiraled down, Darren's warped visage shot through the Hesea friend lost to the very others that now thrummed with predatory delight. Let her go, he roared, the rasp of a familiar voice layered with unrecognizable fury, resonating through the haunt of memories as if conjured from the dead. Cassandra, run! Before I could process his presence, a shriek echoed, a horrific sound that drowned out reason, the chorus of shadows rising in a frenzy, their grotesque forms flickering behind him like an infernal dream. With each disorienting pulse of fear, I glimpsed faces, blurred and writhing, those who had been consumed before memories bleeding together in an amalgamation of anguish. Tom, now twisted into something more, became a reminder of what awaited us all. Only when you face the truth will it release its grip. Angela's haunting voice slithered through the chaos, a mocking echo wrapping around me, shrouding my escape in fear. Darren's figure faltered, the shadows tearing at him, elongating into tendrils that grasped his outstretched hand. I could not reconcile the truth, their connection, their shared purpose shrouded in a deeper horror I dared not fathom. Cassandra, he screamed, the weight of loss reverberating in the air around us. I watched helplessly as the shadows ambushed him, shredded fragments of his being swallowed whole. What do I have to face? I called out, my voice trembling, a desperate prayer lost in the maelstrom of uncertainty. If you want to save yourself, you must confront us, Angela said, the shadows flaring around her in an insatiable frenzy. I could feel their hunger, raw and unrelenting, me breath shallow and choked. In that split second, torn between despair and the flickering hope for survival, I realized confronting the truth meant grappling with the darkness within myself, more haunting than any sinister specter. But as I prepared to shout out once more, the darkness shifted without warning. A whirlpool of shadows swirled frantically, and I felt the weight dragging me back into their embrace. Cassandra, echoed a chorus of lost souls, their cries blending into a single, overwhelming scream, erupting from the void. Then everything shattered. The corridor twisted grotesquely, distorting as I was pulled deeper into its labyrinth, torn from what tethered me to the surface, the claws of oblivion latching greedily around my heart. And in that fleeting moment, as the shadows dismantled my reality, it dawned upon me that the true horror was not the faces before might, was the revelation waiting in the dark, poised to emerge as I fell into the impending abyss. I gasped, swallowing the palpable dread, only to find my own reflection staring back at me from the void eyes hollow, a smirk dancing on my lips that echoed through the yawning darkness. What will you choose? The darkness whispered, relentless, as it threatened to consume me whole. The echo of the void reverberated through my very core. The chilling realization that the darkness was not merely outside thrummed through my veins. My heart raced, caught in a relentless rhythm that matched the rising tide of shadows. I refused to be a part of this. I screamed, but the words felt feeble, swallowed by the encroaching darkness that coiled tighter around me. Hissing with a venomous anticipation, panic prickled at my skin as I fought against the creeping sensation of my own will being siphoned away. The twisted visage of Darren lingered, his eyes wide with an unending despair, their depths lost amid the ravenous shadows. "You have to remember who you are," he urged, a fragment of his voice slipping into a desperate whisper that seemed to rise from an abyss of sorrow. "You're stronger than this." Within the storm of chaos, I could feel the memories materializing like specters, each whisper an insistent pull toward the truth I sought to avoid. Faces flickered in and out of focus. I saw my parents, their laughter now twisted, their smiles fading into expressions of anguish. The nightmares that had plagued my youth surged for the cacophony of sacrifice and torment. At that moment, I was forced to confront it. The loneliness that gnawed at my spirit, the understanding of pain I had tried so hard to bury. The shadows, they reveled as I stumbled deeper into this psyche. This forlorn landscape sprinkled with self-doubt and regret. The echoes of my former life morphing into a desolate soundscape. "Face the fears." Angela's voice surged within the shadows, as her haunting form danced among the swirling darkness. Her eyes burned, their infernal glow a reflection of the chaos that lay in wait. "The fears you try to forget, they give you power." Suddenly, the shadows receded slightly, revealing glimpses of my past moments that wrenched my heart from the comfortable shelter of oblivion. The day I turned my back on Tom as he delved too eagerly into the matter of the otherworldly. His impassioned pleas had churned with a nightmarish revelation, his warnings falling on deaf ears as I ran from what I couldn't comprehend. The shadows tugged hungrily at my heart, inhaling the remnants of joy that now lay shattered on the pavement of memory. I was scared. I roared, desperation fueling my voice. "I thought I was protecting us." The shadows laughed, a cruel and mocking sound, a symphony layered with anguish. "You still do," they taunted, slithering back into the recesses of my mind. "Even now, you think ignorance will shield you." A scream died on my lips. I felt encased, the darkness closing in again. Almost soothing, caressing Guntal abruptly. It withdrew. I stood in an empty void, devoid of sound, save for the pulse of something faint yet ominous, throbbing from the darkness heart. I sensed that I had stepped into something unfathomable, an enigma looming over my essence, draped in despair. Then, as if summoned from the depths of that darkness, Tom appeared, his eyes wide and pleading, yet tinged with an inexplicable despair. He wore the tattered remnants of hope, that fervent flicker, and with it came the nightmarish truths. "You must choose, Cassandra," he roared, a voice of desperation layered with a sense of urgency that cut through the shadow's suffocating grip. I glanced toward him, trembling as the memories crashed over me like a torrential wave, clandestine whispers and twisted half-truths crawling back into my consciousness. I could almost hear it, the distant echo of that fateful night, his voice breaking through the barrier I had constructed around myself. "They want to use you as the vessel, Tom." My throat burned as anguish nearly stranglehold my voice. "I didn't believe you. I wanted it to be over, to escape. I can't face this." The shadows widened, inhaling my words like a feast, feasting on my admission of defeat, and for an agonizing second, I felt them extend a hand toward Tom's invitation to merge with the desolation that hung thick in the air around us. But he stood firm, his gaze locked onto mine, begging me to remember the truth of what he had uncovered, the entities lurking in the void, the ones who fed on fear. "Cassandra, remember, there's still a way to break it." But suddenly a horrible rupture pulsed through the fabric of that desolate realm. A cold undercurrent surged from the voids. A tangible realization struck me like a physical blow. I could not turn back. I had unwittingly allowed them the leash, and I felt the burden of their hunger as it writhed through the chasm of my very being. The shadows coiled, as tendrils snaked across my form, tightening their grip with each heartbeat, each ragged breath a resonant symphony of despair. "Face the truth," Angela screamed, her form a chaotic dance of torment, each word laced with the temptation of surrender. "Only when you embrace the darkness will you be free." I could feel Tom's presence fading, his desperate cries morphing into a haunting echo, leaving me adrift in a sea where reality began to fray and unravel. "Cassandra, you can't let them win." But before I could act, the shadows surged forward, enveloping me in a suffocating darkness that erased the line between my existence and theirs. I fought against the tide, clawing, screaming, but the tendrils of despair were relentless, unfurling with a terrifying hunger as I felt myself spiral deeper into the abyss. The chilling whisper turned into a cold howl, a terrifying promise engulfing me whole. "You cannot escape your truth." And then I knew I was being drawn not just into the darkness around me, but toward something even more unfathomable at its heart. A truth buried deep, a legacy that awaited to be unearthed. Suddenly, the shadows parted, revealing a colossal figure, swirling and thunderous, its eyes burning bright amidst the dark. "Are you ready to face him, Cassandra?" It growled, an unseen entity more colossal than I could comprehend, each word dripping with malevolence. I stood frozen, heart racing, the finality of existence constricting around me, the truth looming larger than the weight of my own fears. Before I could answer, the figure lunged forward, a dark shape blurring the lines of reality, and in that instant, the last remnants of hope shattered into pieces, and I screamed, drowning in the despair that threatened to consume me whole. "Join us?" The voices echoed, penetrating my very soul, as I felt the darkness reach for my hand. Seeking the ultimate truth, it was ready to take me into depths I had never imagined I would confront. But I didn't know if I would emerge as Cassandra, or become something darker, twisted forever within the nightmare that awaited. Cold and unrelenting, the void pulsed around me, a living nightmare thrumming with a tormented heartbeat that synchronized with my own. The colossal figure loomed, its presence suffocating, blurring the lines of reality. The moment felt eternal, each second stretching like a taut wire ready to snap under the weight of what was to come. In my heart, an instinctual dread clawed its way up, warning me of the horrors that lay ahead. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice a mere whisper swallowed by the darkness. "What do you want from me?" It paused, for an unending moment locking me in its scorching gaze, swirling with shadows and pain, the very embodiment of despair. "You know," it rasped, its voice like gravel cascading down a cavern. "Your fear is the key, your memories, the ammunition. Surrender to the truth, embrace what you have hidden, and all shall be revealed." Nightmarish images flickered through my mind, scattered remnants of childhood fears, the basement filled with darkness, the secret voice in the attic I had tried so hard to ignore, the echoes that whispered my name at twilight. These were not mere illusions. They were the manifestations of a deeper terror woven into the fabric of my existence, as if summoned by my thought. The shadows erupted, morphing into twisted forms. The figures of my past danced and writhed within them, each one a reflection of lost innocence and suppressed nightmares. There was Tom, once vibrant but now a distorted remnant, his features twisted and elongated, an unrecognizable mask of anguish. The figure took a step closer, its shape distorting, shadows folding in upon themselves. "He is the one who sought knowledge, the one who dared to embrace the unknown, and look where it led him." Its voice rose into a howl that resonated through my very core, vibrating within me like a discordant symphony. "You should have left him to crumble within his own darkness." "No," I cried out, my voice rising in defiance. "You don't understand. He warned me, he was trying to help." But the malevolent entity simply laughed, a sound that reverberated through the void, shaking the memories that clung to me like wet rags. "Help? He wanted you to be a part of his folly. If you had accepted his truth when it was tender, you would have power beyond measure. Power beyond measure." The thought wrapped around me, seductive and intoxicating. I could feel the shadows imploring me to give in, to let reality crumble beneath the weight of what I had feared. "You were always meant to be a vessel, Cassandra," it continued, its voice a murmur now, soft yet treacherous. Let go of your pretense, embrace him, as if the universe conspired against me. Tom's distorted visage flickered with an energy that pulled at my heart, forcing me to confront the decision I had evaded for so long. The seductive darkness whispered of a promise, of strength and freedom from the pain of choices past and buried truths. How easy it would be to let go and join him in the darkness, to drown out the horror of existence in exchange for power that would eclipse my every fear. But alongside that temptation, a flicker of resolve ignited, the tiniest ember born amid the chaos. No, I won't be what you want me to be, I breathed, searching the chaos for an anchor. What I choose matters. I won't let you turn me into this. Suddenly, the shadows lashed out, an angry storm churning around me, their howls wrapping tight around my throat as if to strangle that flicker of resistance. You think you can defy us? They taunted, the darkness coiling against my skin, tightening like a noose. You will join us. This is your destiny. The ghostly tendrils snaked into my mind, raking through the insecurities I had tried so hard to conceal, twining their way around my deepest fears. I could feel the whispers becoming louder, the shadows murmuring dark revelations, curling like smoke around my resolve. But just as I felt myself teetering on the brink, something shifted. The darkness quaked. The colossal figure began to fragment, its shadows swirling like embers scattering in the wind. Abruptly, a blinding light pierced through the chaos, radiating warmth, illuminating my surrounds, and forcing the shadows into retreat. Cassandra, a figure stood amidst the luminosity. Angela, her form radiant yet trembling, an orb of vibrant energy in stark contrast to the churning void. Not everything is lost. The choice is still yours to make. Don't give in. In that moment, clarity ignited within me. I could feel the weight of my decision. I could choose to either embody the darkness and become a part of the horror encroaching upon me, or I could fight, embrace the light Angela represented, and carve my path through the shadows. But even as I summoned my strength, the darkness roared in fury, rushing toward me like a ravenous tide. Deny the light, Cassandra. You will become one of us. The entity shrieked, and the shadows writhed chaotically, threatening to engulf me in a whirlpool of despair. Just as the void reached its apex, its dark, jagged edges brimming with terror, I took a step toward Angela, extending my hand toward the light, my heart hammering in raw panic. But the moment my fingers breached the border between light and dark, the shadows burst forth with a vomitous roar, a surge of malignancy that enveloped me, trapping me in a cocoon of despair. The grip tightened, wrenching me away from the light, and the last thing I heard was Angela's piercing scream, fading into the dark. Cassandra, no! With a cruel snap, the shadows snapped closed around me, and I was plunged into the depths of unending darkness, the promise of oblivion settling over my mind like a heavy blanket. As I descended, I felt something claw at the edges of my consciousness, a buried sensation rising from the abyss. The memory of a child's laughter, cut off too soon, resonated through the void, mingling with the shrieks of despair surrounding me, and a sickening realization washed over me in waves, sapping my strength. Their laughter, it was my laughter. Before I could grasp its implications fully, the shadows twisted around me sharply, and I was pulled swiftly into another memoria moment I had locked away for fear of its truth. A flicker of resolve sparked again, the realization pressing upon me like a hoof upon a fallen creature. I had to confront the origins of my deepest fears, the truth that lay awoken and terrified within. But as I reached for it, the darkness pounced. It's time to face yourself, it hissed, a frenzied motion unraveling a shell of illusion and plunging me deeper into the chasms of nebulous horrors. And just as the foreboding touch of shadow clasped around my heart, I glimpsed a reality I had forgotten, a reflection in the void, my monstrous self, waiting to swallow me whole. The final whispers of laughter echoed wildly as everything crumbled into an echoing embrace of nothingness, leaving me with just one terrible fact. The truth I sought may just be the death of me. The void pulsed around me, an echo of my own trepidations. As I descended further into the abyss, cold tendrils of dread wormed their way beneath my skin. Memories that had once been mere shadows flared into horrific clarity, each one bringing forth a cacophony of emotion that rattled through the isolation. In that darkness, I heard a distorted whisper of a familiar voice laced with a manic edge. Cassandra. Come play with us again. It didn't sound like Tom. This voice was higher, tinged with a playful malice that curdled my blood. I forced myself to awaken the determination locked in my gut. I needed to face this darkness head-on. But the closer I moved toward the echoes of laughter, the further it retreated, swirling like smoke in the eye of a storm. A little closer, it cooed, each cadence dripping with a sinister charm. Let us remind you of the games we used to play. That I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to let those memories suffocate. Methy had been buried for a reason. But as I staggered through a fog of remorse, flashes of forgotten moments assaulted me. The basement that held shadows of fear, the attic where secrets twisted and squirmed, and, above all, the horrors of a childhood forgotten. There it was again, faint at first like an echo taken too long to return. Meats of laughter tuned to a dissonant pitch swelled around me, plunging deep into the recesses of my mind. I could almost see them. Childhood friends long gone, their faces twisted into ghoulish grins, their eyes darker and more knowing than I remembered. Remember when we played hide and seek in the dark? The taunting voice interlaced with slithering echoes. You always lost. Shut up, I shouted, though my voice felt fragile, barely pushing through the oppressive weight of despair. Anger flared within me as I fought against the memory, pushing against its suffocating pull. You're not real. You're just a nightmare. Are we? The laughter swarmed, a chorus of cruelty that sent shivers racing down my spine. Or are we your forgotten truths? The shadows of your past warped into something far more delightful. A harsh wind howled through the void, sending the visions swirling around me. Nightmarish scenes forming and reforming like a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. My heart raced. Each image flared to lift a little girl hiding beneath a fraying blanket, a boy crouching in the corner of a dimly lit room, their laughter echoing sinisterly as I fought against my own treacheries. I understood now. The shadows didn't just want to imprison me. They craved my acknowledgement. They thrived on the fears I had buried alive, cobwebbed memories eager to spring forth like weeds thriving in darkness. Every noise, every laugh, felt like an accusation, each pointed reminder pricking at the edges of my resolve. Do you remember when we found it? The eerie voice continued its torturous melody, spun from threads of my disfigured past. The door beneath the stairs? The one no one was supposed to open. The revelation struck me hard. The laughter now joined by the cacophony of innocence turned to horror. It was all there, buried under layers of neglected memories, a doorway to something ancient and undying lurking just out of sight. The truth began to unfold before me like a grotesque flower, petals peeling back to reveal a heart that pulsed with the very rage of my repressed fears. I stumbled backward, desperate to break the hold. No, stop, I screamed, but the laughter only grew louder, swirling in a spiral, drawing me closer to a gaping maw that beckoned tenderly, promising understanding in its depths. Don't you want to know, Cassandra? Don't you want to remember? A vision tore through the darkness. I'm standing outside a household once brimming with life, the source of the haunting specter I despised. My fingers pressed against the rough wood of an unyielding door, forbidden and heavy with the weight of all that lingered behind. I could almost hear Angela's voice, desperate and shrill. Don't go in there, Cassandra. Don't let it in. Yet here I was, tempted by shadow and curiosity. The doorway rose to the surface of my mind, unlocking fragments of memories long hidden. Luminescent candles casting dancing shapes, the forbidden rituals whispered in hushed urgency, voices that promised power beyond comprehension. In that moment, the walls of darkness seemed to quiver. The laughter altered and segued into a low hum, laced with anticipation, signaling that something was about to break free, a sickly amalgam of my worst fears and greatest desires merging into one grotesque form. Just as the grotesque door swung slightly ajar, revealing the pulsating darkness eager to consume me, I felt a chilling hand clasp my wrist, the presence of something utterly sinister. Let it go, Cassandra. You can't fight what you really are. The world trembled violently before me, shadows writhing and stretching as shapes emerged, silhouetted figures forming against the dim light emanating from the open door. Their eyes glowed a spectral green, gazing into my soul as if they had awaited me for an eternity. And then, as the last shred of light flickered and died, they began to whisper my name, chorus-like yet utterly dissonant, all but drowning out my final protest. "Cassandra, Cassandra, we've been waiting for you." In that moment, dread engulfed me entirely. I was not merely losing myself. I was rediscovering the monster buried deep within the one that had always awaited the right moment to stride forth from shadow. As darkness descended on me, dragging my consciousness into the churning depths of promised horrors, I realized with a sickening twist that the true nightmare was only just beginning. In a last fleeting thought, I felt them clawing at the edges of my sanity, whispering the final truth I so desperately wanted to forget. It was time to face the dark desires that awaited me. They would leave no stone unturned. As the whispers engulfed me, pooling into a maddening chorus that echoed through the recesses of my mind, I felt an unfamiliar ache stirring within a pull towards the shadows. The suffocating darkness thickened around me like a viscous fog, while the glowing red eyes of the silhouettes pierced through, igniting the deepest corners of my fears. "Join us, Cassandra," they implored, their voices rising and falling like waves crashing upon an unseen shore. "The games have just begun." Panic clawed at my throat as I instinctively tried to escape their grasp, but the void had morphed into a twisted labyrinth of distorted memories, each new turn unveiling manifestations of my repressed dread. Forgotten figures flitted along the edges of my vision, draped in a haze of lament and laughter. It was a suffocating reminder that I could not outrun my own past. Suddenly, the Byzantine darkness stuttered for a moment, revealing my childhood home, transformed into something grotesque and otherworldly. The cracked wallpaper molded into grotesque faces. The ceilings dripped with a life of their own, pulsating like flesh with each beat of my heart. My bare feet met the cold floor, grounding me, but the chill was seeping into my bones, twisting my reality into a malignant theater of horrors. "Do you want to play again?" The once familiar now sounded even more sinister, the disembodied laughter slithering around me as if celebrating my despair. My heart thundered in time with the rhythm of the monsters lurking behind every shadow. I stumbled toward the stairs, drawn like a moth to a flame flickering dangerously ahead. That as I ascended, the air grew thick with an almost tactile dread. A dim light glowed beneath the attic door, casting deceptive warmth against the encroaching shadows. An unsettling weight hung in the air, each step creaking beneath the burden of my anxiety. Memories splintered like fragile glass. Moments flickered through my mind, Angela's face contorted in fear, Tom's eyes wide with terror, toys strewn around the attic, once treasured tokens now becoming vessels for something darker. "What did you bring, Cassandra?" The voice slithered through the wooden beams, and I involuntarily shuddered, sensing my past clawing its way back into the present. "What secrets did you bury deep?" I reached for the knob, my pulse racing, and as the cold metal brushed against my palm, a jolt of electricity shot through me. Hesitation flickered within, but I steeled myself. The laughter outside swelled, urging me to surrender. With a deep breath, I twisted the handle and pushed the door open. The sight before me was both beautiful and horrifying. The attic was ablaze with waxen candlelight, illuminating the spidery web that stretched delicately from the rafters. Beneath it, a circle of darkened glass gleamed ominously, a makeshift altar decorated with objects that sent a chill racing down my spine. Doll parts grinned up at me, their hollow eyes reflecting the hunger of the shadows, and in their midst lay an intricately crafted box, covered in etchings of ancient symbols. "Welcome back." The voice was sing-song yet dripping with a primal edge that surrounded me like a shroud. The moment encapsulated my terror. These were not mere memories. They were anchors pulling me toward something unearthly. "And this," the voice continued, "is where it all began." That I stepped forward, caught in a magnetic pull, my breath mingling with the sweet scent of melted wax. Exhaustion tugged at me as I neared the altar. Suffocating despair and blinding curiosity blended into one. The box flickered alive, inexplicably, as if feeding off my trepidation. I reached for it, fingers brushing the surface as the air around me crackled. "Open it," Cassandra, please, don't keep us waiting. Panic surged through my veins, but a lure beckoned edges of forgotten emotions. Longing, anguish, and exhilaration danced tantalizingly at the threshold of my consciousness. The tether to that voice, that charm now wrapped like thick vines around my heart, snaked deeper into my psyche. Remember the games? It crooned gently, almost tenderly, sending goosebumps rippling across my skin. You wanted to win before, didn't you? Don't you wish to go back? Thunder rolled in the distance, the dim light wavering ominously, flickering shadows stretching and contorting around me like hands grasping for salvation. I could feel the presence behind me, pulsing with anticipation, feeding off my hesitation. Then I caught a glimpse of movement. Emerging silently from the depths of the darkness, phantoms began to materialize. Children, faces familiar yet grotesquely altered, their laughter twisting into wails. Cassandra, you promised, they cried out, their voices growing frantic. We're all here. You have to choose. Frozen in terror, I realized they were not teasing or taunting. They were insistent, demanding I participate once more in the grim game we had spun together long ago. My fingers trembled above the box as a blood-red hue spilled from within, seeping through the seams, illuminating the faces of those awaiting my decision. Every creak of the floor echoed like a heartbeat, and just as the tension reached a fever pitch, I heard a voice breaking through the cacophony, tinged with urgency. Cassandra, don't listen to them. Tom's voice cut through like a knife, sharp and desperate. The moment hung heavy, suffocating. My heart raced as I fought against the pull of the box, its siren call growing ever more tantalizing. But before I could react, the box exploded open, a torrent of shadows spilling forth, engulfing every inch of the room. The laughter crescendoed into maniacal shrieks, filling the air with a sickening blend of despair and delight. In that chaos, my memories collided violently, each a jagged shard capable of cutting deep a kaleidoscope of everything I ever feared but so yearned to understand. As the darkness spiraled out of control, the shadows began to form into one horrific visage. I could see its features coalescing, stalking forward with twisted malevolence, its glowing eyes now searching for me amid the chaos. No, please, I screamed, realizing I was not merely confronting the shadows of my past. I was awakening the true horror lurking within them. And just as the shadows lunged forward, ready to claim what they sought, the last thing I heard was Tom's shout, filled with unadulterated terror. Cassandra, don't look away. But it was too late. I was lost in the suffocating, ravenous dark, drowning in the sinister truth, and somewhere within the chaos, I heard the sinister laughter soaring high, echoing. We've finally found you. Then everything shattered into a kaleidoscope of darkness. The world spun violently around me, chaos twisting my senses into a whirlpool of terror and confusion. As I grappled with the realization of my burgeoning fate, the shadows coiled and writhed, their tainted grace reflecting the anguish woven throughout my existence. Just as I struggled to breathe, something shifted. An insidious laughter resonated through the storm, a cruel reminder of the truth I had tried so desperately to ignore. The figure that had materialized from the darkness was more than just a manifestation of my fears. It bore facets that felt eerily familiar. In the crescent light that flickered through the sea of shadows, I saw glimpses of Tom's face twisted and tortured, yet unervingly familiar, reminding me of nights spent in laughter and camaraderie before things spiraled beyond comprehension. Cassandra, the shadowed visage crooned, the edges of its form fraying into a chaos of sorrow and jagged edges. But it was not just Tom I saw. It was every soul intertwined with my own, the lost children, the long-buried memories, the ones who had vanished into the dark. You wished to discover purpose, to conquer your fears. But they crave you as much as you crave. I stumbled backward, choking on the flood of memories, everything I had excised from my life. The rituals, the late-night whispers, the eerie promise of power offered by a dark allure were now gathering like vultures around me. They craved my essence, sought vengeance for the betrayal I had unwittingly wielded against my past. Remember that night? The figure implored, twisting its features to match mine. Phantoms of childhood resurrecting from the ashes of forgotten dreams. The night you all gathered, the night you chose to close the door. I fought against the sorrowful tug, anger and regret blending into an achingly fierce cocktail of clarity. I didn't want this, I yelled, my voice discordant yet strident. You have to let go of the past, let it all go. My heart raced, a frenetic pulse echoing the chaos. But the shadows responded with a sinister harmony laughter that morphed into a wild cacophony of screams, opening the doorway to a reality I had shut in fear. They surged towards me, shadows bending and twisting with a fiendish glee, and one whispered, low and melodic, "Open the box and you shall understand." The more I fought, the tighter the grasp of the shadows became, their tendrils weaving through the air, desperate to drag me further from the light. My heart raced, time slipping like sand through my fingers as the memories collided, each illuminating a path I had feared to traverse. It struck me then the truth behind the horror. The darkness mirrored not just the tragedy of loss, but my own fear, my own desire to escape the curse I had buried within the very seams of my being. Cassandra. Tom's frantic voice echoed amidst the turmoil, sharp and agonized. Don't succumb. You are stronger than this. His words, a spark against the tide of noise, cut through the chaos, pulling me back to the surface. I had to remember my choice, the power I held within. The shadows danced roguishly, curling tendrils reaching to encircle me. But I only needed to breathe, to gather myself amid the tempest threatening to devour me. I clenched my fists, resolving to confront the darkness dwelling within. This was not just about them, it was about the monster I had concealed, the questions I dared not answer. The abyss swirled as I took a step forward, heart racing, seeking to reclaim myself. Listen to the voices, I spoke loudly, my words an incantation. Every name you call, every soul you lose has a right to this dance. The frenetic shadows paused, and I felt their malicious intent shift, intrigued by my candor, teetering on the edge between rage and mirth. Face us then, they hissed, the chorus of voices now a cacophony of malevolence drowning out reason. Face your choice or be consumed. With a deep breath, I opened the box. The air surged with a vibrant pulse that electrified my senses, igniting visions of souls lost. Embedded within the intricate etchings were their agonies, the laughter of childhood friends, echoes of hollow promises. I could see it all, the flutter of hope drowned by sorrow, the shimmer of potential smothered under desperation. Every choice has brought you here, I murmured slowly, the shadows swirling hesitantly in response. I refused to forget. Just as I spoke, understanding hit me like a thunderclap. I didn't have to fight them, I had to embrace them, to reconcile with the truth that had chained me down. In a swirl of darkness and light, I felt the tendrils unravel, entangling themselves with compassion rather than malicious intent. For what they sought was not solely my fear, but rather the liberation of a soul that had long hovered at the precipice of despair. I am not afraid, I declared, light pouring from within, flooding my veins. I choose to remember not only my past but also the strength I hold. In that moment, the shadows recoiled, hesitant yet curious. A luminous halo spread from my core, illuminating the dark corners of the void. I could see Tom, his fervor blossoming into life, eyes flickering with golden light as he approached beneath the expanding glow. With renewed resolve, I turned my focus to the dark entity, the embodiment of every fear, every doubt that loomed overhead. You are not my captor. I am not your vessel, I screamed, unwavering in a deafening roar. The shadows surged, a swirling tempest that clawed at my essence, retching against the realization that I was reclaiming my light. Just as the dark entity lunged towards me, I thrust outward with all the intensity of the luminescence burning within, breaking free from the clutches of despair that had held me for so long. That a blinding flash erupted as the shadows frothed and crumbled, illusions bleeding into nothingness. A chorus of anguished cries echoed, silenced and evacuated as the truth swelled within me, unfurling like vines in the light. The darkness fell away, leaving nothing but stillness behind, reverberating with the call of memories tempered with understanding. I stood alone, trembling yet released from all that had haunted me. But just before the silence settled back in, one last chilling whisper rode the air. Cassandra, it taunted softly, wrapping around me like silk. You may have escaped, but we are never far behind. That which you leave behind will always linger, waiting in the spaces you dread to revisit. And as the shadows faded into nothingness, I understood I was free, yet the remnants of my darkness would forever echo in the corners of my mind. I had not banished it. Instead, I had become its keeper, reminding it that in every shadow, there was a flicker of light prepared to fight back. That as I turned toward my newfound reality, there lurked an unsettling truth, a revelation that bore the weight of calamity. The night whispered chilling tales, and with each step I took, the echo continued to whisper, "We will see you again eventually."